Are you ready for the next model that you need to know as a new instructional designer e-learning developer? Well, today we're going to talk all about evaluation through the Kirkpatrick model. Hi friends, I'm Vanessa Elzate, the CEO of Anchored Training, and I help instructional designers and e-learning developers get off of the sidelines and get into the L&D game. And so today, we're going to talk all about evaluation and the Kirkpatrick model. And this really kicked off because as a company, we are actually consulting with a new client in instructional design and teaching them how to be an instructional design team. And part of that is that we're talking about evaluation. And so we started talking about the levels of evaluation. And so I know that the Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation, you know, it has some limitations, it has some drawbacks, but overall, it's a really great model for people that are new to the field because it's easy to understand. Everyone talks about it. So likely you're going to see a lot of job interviews that refer back to it in some way, shape, or form, or you're going to get a question about the Kirkpatrick model. So it's really good to have information about how you can apply and how you can utilize it in your back pocket. So the Kirkpatrick model is 4 levels, and sometimes you'll see this depicted as like a process, or sometimes you'll see it as a pyramid starting at level 1 at the bottom and going up to level 4. And there's a really good reason for that. And we'll talk about that as we go through. But the 4 levels of evaluation is level 1 is evaluation. Level 2 is learning. Level 3 is behavior. And level 4 is return on investment, or ROI. And so these 4 levels get talked about a lot, throughout your instructional design journey, throughout your different projects. And typically, most organizations only hang out with levels 1 and level 2, because levels 3 and level 4, they're a lot harder to get to, and they take a lot more time than just level 1 and level 2. And let's be honest, most of us, well, not us as instructional designers, because we want to do right by the field, but most organizations just want to get the training out there because they think that's what's going to solve their problem. And they don't even want to be bothered with evaluating whether or not a training is great or not. They'll just take levels 1 and 2 as whether or not the training was worth their time, worth their money, and if they're actually seeing any results without doing the work of levels 3 and level 4. So we're going to break down step by step the different levels of evaluation and how you can use that level of evaluation and use it on your next project. So level 1, evaluation. And this is the simplest, the easiest, the most boring. It's probably why it's like that's why. It's the biggest part of the pyramid when they're doing a pyramid image of it. And that is because it is straight right after the training, your generic survey or your interview with participants. So, did you like the training? Did you find it engaging? What did you think of the trainer? Did they seem knowledgeable? What are some other questions? Did you like the venue? Do you feel like you learned something today? What would you improve upon the training? Or everyone's favorite, a smile sheet. And while that's all really great information, and you'll get some feedback, like usable feedback, right? Like if a trainer was awful or did something that they should not have done during training, you'll hear about it. But it's not really giving you what you need in order to do better and understand whether or not that training met the goals of, what it intended to do. And a lot of times, let's be honest, whenever I'm asked to do a survey, I'm like, oh my God, like another survey. And all I want to do is just like, okay, yep, like middle, unless I had a really great experience and I really want you to know about it. Or more often than not, if I had a really bad experience, then I'm really going to make sure you know about that. And it's like Yelp, right? Like the only people that really Yelp things are people that, are trying to be professional Yelpers, which is a thing, because they get free like food and stuff. Or people who really had a bad experience. There's really never objective reviews because who has that kind of time? And so taking this information, while it's great to start with, it's definitely not going to give you true feedback as to what or how the training performed, if learning took place, and if it's something that's going to actually make an impact, past 5 seconds after the training or 30 minutes after the training, when typically surveys go out. So it's something to think about when you're thinking about level 1, and that you can't just implement level 1 and really know the impact or evaluate your training. So level 2, learning. And this is your knowledge check or your quizzes. Another place that is very often utilized as an evaluation tool. So many clients and so many customers of mine, they put in these quizzes, they put in these knowledge checks, and the reason for that is because they want to know, okay, where are these students getting stuck? Where could we, what are they answering correct? What are they answering incorrect? What is, where could we improve upon the training? Because everyone's getting stuck at this point of the training. And that's all very helpful, and it helps you refine, but that's typically those quizzes and those knowledge checks only happen right after you take the training, when all the content is fresh in your mind. Also, you're probably writing questions that are pretty easy to answer. I even had a client tell one of our instructional designers, so can you make the questions like, what color is the sky? Like, dolphin, blue, cat. Literally that type of insanity. And I'm like, no. For the integrity of the learning and to not look like a complete fool, no. That's not how you create a knowledge check. That's not how you quiz someone on their learning. It was honestly baffling that someone, then why are you putting in a knowledge check is my question. If you're literally feeding them the answer, why are you bothering with a knowledge check? Let's talk about that. And that is, a lot of times I also see that a lot. They want to not truly figure out, where the students are getting stuck. They're like, oh, just if it's like for software training, if it's a software simulation and they have to click on a certain button in order to move on, they're just like, no, just give them unlimited tries. Okay, how are you gonna know if students are getting stuck on something because they're not retaining that? Or maybe there's a problem with the software. It's hard to see. It's not intuitive. How are you going to know those types of things if you're telling them, first of all, in the hint, what to click on, but also you're just giving them unlimited tries until they finally figure it out? That's not actual learning, but sure, we'll go with that. We'll do it. So now that we've gone through levels 1 and 2, you can see why most companies basically stop there. That for a lot of them is enough. They're just training for them is checking off a box. It's not what I like to think about training. It's not our philosophy at Anchor Training, but that's what a lot of clients just want. They're just trying to check off a box to say that they did training and they met the need. So they never really get to or have any interest to get to levels 3 and 4, but I think it's actually really important to a lot of organizations that want to make learning as part of their culture, and they want to make learning the center of the organization. So we always say at Anchor Training that learning development, training, it is the heart of the organization, because that is where you can make the most impact on your employees. Yes, HR is great. They compensate, they, are part of the compensation plan, they're part of your benefits package, and, they do some activities for wellness and for, employee satisfaction and engagement. That's all great. The hub and the heart of the organization is through your learning development and your training, because if your company and your employees are not feeling like they're being supported in their role, or they're not getting any sort of challenge, professional development, if they're not seeing growth or the ability to grow in the organization, then they are not going to stick around. They're going to look for another organization that maybe will cut down on their, they're not going to have as much compensation, but they have more opportunity in order to be, to grow, to move up, to develop, in their career as a person. And so that's really the heart and the hub of the organization. And that's a total tangent on, our philosophy, but it ties back into levels 3 and 4. And then if you're if you're not actually accomplishing or trying to evaluate at these levels, then you're not truly getting to the heart of the organization and understanding whether or not you need to make a shift in some of your largest training initiatives. So level 3, behavior. So if they walk out of training, are we guaranteeing that they're actually applying what they learned? Maybe in the beginning, maybe, as soon as they walk out the door, but after a while, that behavior slips back in and, they forget what they learned in training and they go back to what they knew, or their old ways. And so in order to do this evaluation of behavior, it's really important that, 6 months later, you're having these interviews and these surveys of, their managers, a 360 feedback tool, getting feedback from not just their managers, but their peers, their colleagues, their teammates, to know whether or not the learning that they did back in, 3 months before is actually being applied in their everyday. And then you're also asking the learner, are you applying these things? Why or why not? Do you remember it? Do you need some sort of refresher? What is it that we can do to ensure this starts to becoming more, this skill, this knowledge, this process is more ingrained in your everyday and it actually becomes a behavior change? So remember, they tell you that in order to change behavior, you have to do something for 21 days, which I think it's actually longer than that. Because I do things for 21 days and then I'm back to whatever my bad habit was. So you have to take time to see that behavior change. And so this level, it takes time. You have to remember to go back to it. You have to take the time to do the survey, to analyze the results, to interview the learners and all of those things. And that's taking time and resources away from whatever the priorities are at that time. So a lot of organizations see that and they're like, nope, I'm good, thank you. And then we get to level 4, and this is your return on investment and what the organization is seeing because of the training that was implemented. And this one is very difficult to achieve, and this one takes time and it takes money, and it's not something that can be done overnight, right? So let's, for example, say that you are seeing that your employees are not being retained. And part of the reason that, through exit surveys and other methods that people are not retained at your organization is because of, their managers and poor leadership and things like that, or poor management. Well, if you end up putting together a management training, then it's really important that you take that management training, you set up a control group, because you actually have to figure out if the management training improves retention, and you have to take the time to have the training and then set the managers on their way. And it's a 12 month process, maybe longer, to figure out if people are being retained due to the training that they took, if they're having better experience with their managers. So that, again, takes time. It takes resources. You have to analyze the results. So it takes a huge commitment from the organization to say, yes, this is what's important to us. This is where we're spending some of our extra time and resources in order to make improvements in this area. And then guess what? You can get to the end of that pilot and realize we need to make updates to the management training, and you do that, and then you're back through that process of refining, and hopefully you're spreading it out a little bit more to more managers little by little. But it's the long game, right? It's not an immediate return on your investment. And so companies, a lot of times, they don't really care. Their return on their investment is their bottom line, is the dollars. And evaluating something like employee satisfaction and employee retention, it can be important to them. Is it the most important? A lot of times it's not. So they never even bother with the 4th level evaluation. Again, just checking the box. I also find that a lot of times it can be really hard with the 4th level evaluation to really grasp your head around how you are measuring, ROI. And that takes can take someone who is very analytical. And so for a lot of instructional designers and a lot of organizations, they shy away from it because they just can't wrap their head around it. So I do find that is another reason that level 4 is not achieved or even attempted. So I would be remiss if I didn't have a few minutes to talk about some of the limitations of the Kirkpatrick model. And I think that overall it's a great model to learn. It is important to learn, and I don't think that you should not. I mean, it's also on my ID bookshelf, but it does not take some things into account. So just because you had a really great training doesn't mean that the learning is going to be sustained. There are external factors. There are also internal factors that someone has to take into account, or that is part of whether or not the learning is retained, if behavior is changed, if you're actually seeing return on investment. So is the employee motivated, or are they just sitting there because they kind of have to be there? An unmotivated employee versus an unmotivated employee, I mean, the training could be great, but you won't see the return here because of this motivation factor. You'll see the return here. So it doesn't really address that. It kind of makes it like a little bit broad for the organization. It also makes these casual assumptions, right? So it just basically kind of says that if people like the training, or the more people like the training, the more learning that happens. And that's not a direct correlation. You can like something and not retain the information because it wasn't presented in the appropriate modality and the appropriate medium to make an impact and to lead to better retention. So I definitely don't correlate more people liking the training to remembering it. And again, I think I'd beat this one to a dead horse during my conversation about levels 3 and 4. Levels 3 and 4 are time consuming, so they barely get achieved at a lot of organizations, and they stick to levels 1 and 2, and that is where a lot of organizations feel comfortable because they understand it. They can see the results right away, as opposed to waiting, anywhere from 3 to 12 months to see, the behavior change and the return on investment. So, are you not sure about your next step in learning development? I got you, don't worry. Click the link in my bio to download my free blueprint, and in it is my link to my coaching program. Click on it, apply, let's have a conversation about your next steps and see if we're a good fit to work together. No pressure. If anything, you at least got my free blueprint. Friends, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.